Parking lot outside Mercy General was the kind of quiet that made the hair on your arms stand up. Not peaceful quiet. Wrong quiet. Lenora Briggs had worked the closing shift at the hospital pharmacy for going on 3 years, and she knew the difference. Peaceful quiet was when the last car left the visitor lot and the only sound was the HVAC unit clicking off. Wrong quiet was when you could feel something watching you from the dark between the light posts. She pushed through the side exit at 2047 in the morning, her scrub top still smelling like antiseptic, her sneakers squeaking faintly on the wet asphalt. It had rained earlier, the kind of thin, cold October rain that didn't clean anything, just made everything slick and gray. She had her keys in her left hand, her bag on her right shoulder, and her mind already halfway home to the leftover rice and beans waiting in her refrigerator. She noticed the truck first. A white pickup, lifted with aftermarket lights across the top of the cab. It was parked sideways across 2 spots near the far end of the lot, which was technically the shortcut to where she'd left her Civic. 3 men were leaning against it, young, laughing at something on a phone. She clocked them automatically, the way she'd been trained to clock every room she walked into, every open space she crossed, and she adjusted her angle slightly, moving toward the main exit instead of the shortcut. That was the first sign she paid attention to. The second was when one of them looked up. Not just glanced, looked, tracked, the way a dog tracks a rabbit across a field before deciding whether it's worth running. Lenora kept walking. Steady pace. Eyes forward. She wasn't afraid. Or rather, she'd learned years ago to put fear somewhere quiet and useful, in a back room where it could inform her without controlling her. That was something she'd learned in Bagram, in Kandahar, and 2 deployments she rarely talked about to anyone at Mercy General, because what was there to say, really? Yeah, I was a combat controller. Yeah, I was attached to a special operations unit for 18 months. Yeah, I spent more time in body armor than I did in scrubs for a significant portion of my 20s. People didn't know what to do with that. So she just worked her shift, filled prescriptions, went home. She heard them before she got to the main gate. Hey, 1 word. Flat. A test more than a greeting. She didn't stop. She wasn't obligated to stop. I'm talking to you. She reached the gate. It was locked. Facilities had started locking the pedestrian gate at midnight to cut down on loitering, which was great during the day and deeply inconvenient at 3 in the morning. She'd have to walk around to the ambulance bay exit, which was another 90 seconds in the opposite direction. She turned around. There were 4 of them now, not 3. The 4th had come from somewhere. The shadow beside the loading dock, maybe, or the stairwell she'd passed without checking. She filed that away. Didn't react to it. Just noted it the way you note weather. The one doing the talking was maybe 22. He had a certain kind of face that Lenora had seen in a dozen countries, the face of a young man who had grown up being told he was the most important person in every room he entered, and who had never yet encountered evidence to the contrary. Broad shoulders, nice jacket. The specific confidence of someone who had never once been afraid of a situation they'd created themselves. "You work here?" he said. "I do," she said. "Long shift?" "Long enough." She kept her voice level, interested almost. "The way you talk to a dog you're not sure about, not aggressive, not afraid, just present." He took a step forward. The others spread, just slightly, the way people do when they've done this before. It wasn't theatrical, it was practiced. They fanned into a loose arc, cutting off the angles back toward the building and around the gate. Here's what most people don't understand about being surrounded. The instinct is to look at the person talking to you. The person talking to you is almost never the actual threat. The threat is peripheral. The threat is the one staying quiet, the one moving to your left, the one whose hands you can't see. Lenora was watching all 4 of them at once. "You got a minute?" the talker said. His name, she'd learn later, was Brendan Coyle. 23 years old, 2 prior arrests, both reduced, both involving incidents in parking lots after midnight. His father was a county commissioner. That context would matter later. "Not really," she said. "That's not very friendly." "I'm not trying to be friendly. I'm trying to get to my car." He smiled. The kind of smile that isn't really a smile. It's a flag. It means I've decided something and you don't get a vote. Funny thing about that, Brendan said. Your car's over there. He pointed toward the shortcut, toward where the white truck was still parked, still blocking, where she now saw a fifth man sitting on the hood. And I'm over here, so seems like you gotta come past me to get to it. Lenora looked at the truck. She looked at Brendan. She looked at the 4 points of the arc his crew had formed. And she felt something settle into place inside her. Not anger, not adrenaline, but a particular kind of stillness that people who have never been in real danger often mistake for calm. It wasn't calm. It was focus. It was every non-essential function in her brain stepping back to make room for the part of her that knew exactly what to do. I don't want any trouble, she said. That part was true. It's important to remember that. She meant it completely. She had leftover rice and beans at home. She had a 7 a.m. shift. She had her niece's birthday on Sunday. She genuinely, sincerely did not want any trouble. Nobody ever does, Brendan said, and took another step. She measured the distance. 12 feet. He was moving to close it to 8. The one on her left had edged another step. The one behind her. She knew there was one behind her now. She'd heard the shoe on wet asphalt, was maybe 6 feet back. She exhaled once, slowly. Last chance, she said quietly. Not to threaten him. She just believed in being fair. Brendan laughed. He turned back to look at his crew, the way performers look at their audience, and that was the moment, that half second of misdirected attention, that she moved. She didn't run. Running is panic. What she did was closer to a decision. She closed the 12 feet to Brendan in 4 steps and put him on the ground so efficiently, so quietly, that 2 of his crew didn't immediately process what had happened. She'd used his own forward momentum against him. He'd been mid-step when she reached him, and the wet asphalt did the rest. He went down hard. His elbow hit first. He made a sound that was mostly surprise. The one behind her reacted first, which she'd expected. She turned into him rather than away, which he hadn't expected. People expect you to run from them. They're not prepared for someone who turns toward them with the economy of motion of a person who has trained for exactly this situation for approximately a decade, give or take a combat deployment. He grabbed for her arm. She let him have it, just briefly, just enough for him to commit, and then she redirected, and he joined Brendan on the asphalt. 2 down. The one on her left hesitated. That hesitation was a gift. She used the second to reposition, to put the gate at her back, to close off the rear angle. Now she was looking at 3 standing men and 2 on the ground. The 5th, still on the truck, was now on his feet. She could see him in her peripheral vision. But he hadn't moved toward her. That was interesting. Walk away, she said. Her voice was the same, level, present. The 3rd man, heavy-set, neck tattoos, something metal in his right hand that he hadn't fully committed to yet, looked at his friends on the ground. Then at her. Then at his friends again. What the... he started. Walk away, she said again. Same words, same voice. I'm going to my car. That's all I want. You can help your friends up. You can call whoever you need to call, and everybody goes home. Brendan was getting up. His elbow was bleeding through his jacket. His face had changed. The entitled confidence was still there, but it had a crack running through it now. A hairline fracture of something he probably never felt before. Uncertainty. You don't know who my father is, he said. Old line. Oldest line in the book. I don't need to, Lenora said. He took a step toward her again, and she was honestly a little tired of this part, and she said, Brendan. Just his name. Flat. Clear. He stopped. She hadn't known his name until that moment. She didn't, but she said it the way you say a name when you already know everything about a person, with that particular weight, and something about it worked. Something in the specific confidence of knowing a person's name in a moment when they don't expect you to know it. It checked him. Later, one of the witnesses, a security guard named Mr. Otabek, who had seen the whole thing from the booth and had called the police about 90 seconds in, bless him, said that Brendan Coyle stood there for a full 3 seconds just staring at her before he said anything. What he said was, "This isn't over." And she said, "Sure." And she walked to her car. She sat in the Civic for a moment before starting it. Not shaking, she didn't shake. Or rather, she'd learned to let that happen later, in private, in the shower the next morning where nobody could see it. But she sat there, and she breathed, and she noticed her hands were completely steady, and she thought about her niece's birthday and the rice and beans and a human being's capacity to survive the things they were trained to survive. The police arrived 4 minutes later. This is the part of the story that matters, and most people skip over it because it isn't as interesting as the parking lot. But it matters. The officers took statements. Mr. Otabek had good angles from the booth. He'd been watching from about the time Lenora came through the side exit, because he'd noticed the group by the truck earlier and had been uneasy. He'd seen the arc they formed. He'd seen her try to walk away. He'd seen who moved first. All of it on the security camera, which the hospital's IT team pulled inside of 20 minutes. Brendan Coyle was charged with attempted robbery and criminal threatening. 3 of his crew were charged with varying degrees of the same. The 4th, the one on the hood who never came down, cooperated immediately with the investigation and was separated from the others. His name was Mason, and he was 18, and a public defender who took his case later said he'd been recruited into Brendan's circle about 6 months prior, and had spent most of those 6 months trying to figure out how to leave. That detail mattered to Lenora. She thought about it a lot in the weeks that followed. Brendan's father, County Commissioner Patrick Coyle, released a statement the following week expressing full confidence in the justice system and support for his son. The statement did not mention Lenora. She found that clarifying in a way she didn't need to articulate. What she did do, and this is the part that surprised people who knew her, because they expected her to go quiet about it, to file the incident away in the same place she filed the deployments and the things she'd seen, was call the hospital's administrative office and request a meeting. She had an idea. 2 months after the parking lot, Mercy General launched a personal safety training program for night shift staff. 12 sessions, voluntary but strongly encouraged. They covered awareness, de-escalation, basic physical response for extreme circumstances, and, most importantly, when to call for help before a situation required anything else. Lenora designed it herself, in collaboration with 2 colleagues from a women's self-defense organization and a retired officer who had spent 20 years teaching defensive tactics. She called it Night Ready. The first session had 19 people. The waiting list for the second session had 34. On the first night, she stood in front of the group, in the hospital's multi-purpose room, and looked at the faces, nurses and pharmacists and lab techs and dietary staff, mostly women. Many of them the same people who had said goodnight to her every evening for 3 years without knowing what she carried home. And she said, "The first thing I want to tell you is that I'm not here to make you feel like a victim, and I'm not here to make you feel like a warrior. I'm here to make you feel like yourself. Because you already know more than you think you do. You already read rooms. You already notice when something's wrong. We're going to build on what you already have." She paused. "I had a situation in this parking lot a couple months back. You may have heard about it. And I want to be honest with you, the reason it ended the way it did wasn't because I have some kind of special skill that you don't have access to. It was because I spent years being taught how to trust what I already noticed. That's the whole program. That's it." Someone in the back. She'd learned later it was a phlebotomist named Harriet, who had worked nights at Mercy General for 11 years, raised her hand and said, "What's the first thing we learn?" Lenora thought about the parking lot. The wrong quiet. The white truck angled across 2 spots. The man on the hood who never came down. "The first thing you learn," she said, "is that you already knew something was wrong before anything happened. You felt it. We're just going to teach you what to do with that feeling." The room stayed quiet for a second. Then Harriet said, "Okay." And they began. "I keep thinking about the man on the hood of that truck, the one who never came down. His name was Mason. He was 18 years old. He had been in Brendan's circle for 6 months, and had spent most of those 6 months trying to figure out how to leave. And on the night everything fell apart, he just stayed still. He didn't run toward the fight. He didn't run away from it either. He just sat there on the hood of that white pickup and watched. And when it was over, he was the first one to cooperate. I think about him because I think people misread that story. They hear 5 men cornered a woman in a parking lot, and they think it's a story about strength, about Lenora being tougher than anyone expected. And it is that, but only partly. What strikes me more is what it takes to become someone who doesn't flinch in that moment. Lenora didn't walk out of that side exit at 2047 in the morning and choose to be ready. She'd been choosing it for years before that night. Every training session, every deployment, every time she came home and kept showing up to a pharmacy shift when she could have coasted on what she'd already done. That was the accumulation. That was what was actually standing in that parking lot. There's a version of this story where Lenora just gets to be impressive, and we all feel good about it, and we move on. But I think the more honest version is harder to sit with, because the question it asks is, what are you building day by day that will be there when you need it? Not just physical skill. Lenore herself said it in that multi-purpose room at Mercy General. The first lesson wasn't how to fight. It was learning to trust what you already notice. That takes a different kind of work. It takes the willingness to be honest with yourself about what you're feeling, to sit with discomfort instead of explaining it away, to say something is wrong here, even when everyone around you is acting like nothing is. That's integrity, the real kind, not a quality you perform for other people, but the one you practice privately when no one is grading you. And then there's Mason. I think about what it costs a person to be 18 years old, embedded in something they know is wrong, and to simply not participate in the worst moment of it. That's not nothing. That took something. Maybe it was the beginning of something longer for him. I don't know his story after that night, but I think the act of sitting still, of refusing to add yourself to the harm even when the pressure is to move with the crowd, that matters. It's quiet. It doesn't get written about, but it matters. Lenora built Night Ready, and 34 people signed up for the second session without being asked twice. That happened because she didn't treat what she'd survived as a credential. She treated it as a responsibility. The knowledge she carried wasn't hers to keep. It was hers to pass on. That's what people with real backbone do with what they've been through. They turn it outward. Harriet asked what the first lesson was. And the answer, I think, is the same one whether you're standing in a dark parking lot or sitting in a classroom or trying to figure out how to leave a situation you've been in too long. It starts with trusting what you already know. You already felt it. You just need to learn what to do next.